Hello, and welcome to another UK column interview. My name is Debbie Evans. The vaccine injured and the vaccine bereaved have always been at the top of our agenda, and we will continue to support and walk with those that are vaccine injured and bereaved for however long it takes to get answers and justice. On May the 21st, 2024, the Times chief business correspondent Alex Ralph reported, AstraZeneca hits record high as it's set to double its revenue. Growth will be driven by the launch of 20 new medicines, before 2030, targeting cancer, hypertension, rare diseases, biopharmaceuticals, and their aim is to double their revenues to $80 billion by the end of the decade. But what happened to AstraZeneca Oxford COVID-19 vaccination? Because on the 8th of May, it was announced that after 3 billion doses, the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine was being withdrawn. But why? Because, according to AstraZeneca, newer variants demanded newer, updated vaccines. AstraZeneca said they were incredibly proud of the vaccine, and the decision to withdraw the vaccine was purely commercial. As AstraZeneca forge ahead with their stellar biopharmaceutical agenda, what about those who have been injured, vaccine injured, by the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 injection? What about all of those who have been vaccine injured and bereaved, who have been left behind, ignored and invisible? In November 2022, I had the privilege of meeting and interviewing Adam Rowland, whose stellar career as a very highly qualified sports physiotherapist working with many major rugby league clubs, including England, came to an abrupt end, and his life changed forever. It changed when he took his first AstraZeneca COVID-19 injection to protect members of his own family. Shortly after this injection, Adam became extremely unwell, suffering very serious adverse reactions, and his life has never been the same. And I would like to say to those of you who don't know Adam, we are very humbled to have spoken to him back in November 2022, and his interview will appear in the article beneath this interview. So for those of you who haven't seen the first part, please do catch up. And today, 18 months later, despite being very poorly, Adam joins us today to bring us up to date with what has happened to him. And I would like to just add that prior to Adam suffering these absolutely tragic, serious adverse events, he's never had a sick day in his life. He was super fit, super healthy, no medical problems. So on that note, Adam, thank you so much for agreeing to come back to talk to us. I know that you're not very well at the moment, but welcome back to UK Column.
Thank you, Debbie. It means so much to me, the likes of yourself, UK Column, Stephanie, and all the people in the background are working so hard to raise awareness for us and not forget about us. So, not just on behalf of me, but on behalf of everyone, you really don't know what it means to us. And obviously you've spoken to me and, off camera, and you know what's going on for me. So I think you can appreciate it. But we're 3 years on now, and for the likes of myself and people like yourselves who are doing what mainstream media aren't, we can't thank you enough. So, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart before we even start for this opportunity, for me to get my message out. And it's not about me, Debbie, I'm sure my story isn't unique. I know it isn't because I speak to hundreds of other people and I know there's thousands of us. So I just think my story, in some ways, I'm a bit more fortunate than other people because a lot of it is documented medically. So it's facts. It's not arguable. The facts are there. But sadly, even though I've got all these facts, the NHS, the UK government, and all the mainstream media are completely failing people like me. So just again, thank you for allowing me to get my story out, which I hope can help us all in some small way.
Adam, we have always had the mantra at UK Column, nothing about you without you. And it's incredibly brave of you to stand up publicly and talk about what happened to you, because you were having a great life, a great career, great family. You were doing fantastic. So just for those viewers that haven't met you before and don't know how we've got to today, just give us a little brief resume of what happened the day you went and had the AstraZeneca injection.
Yes, of course. So just briefly first, obviously I worked for 17 years in professional sport before that. I worked the way up to the title of head of medical services and a consultant to some high profile people on the PGA Golf Tour. I'd worked overseas on operational military bases for the UK government, worked with professional ballet companies, rugby league and everything. I was basically as fit as a fiddle. I trained every single day because I couldn't be a professional sports person myself. And as part of my job, I prided myself in keeping myself so fit. So every single day I would work out. I would go in the morning before seeing the players and do a demanding cardiovascular workout. I would row 5K in 18 minutes or ride 20 kilometers on a watt bike in sub half an hour. I would then go about my duties with the players and stuff for the day, treating them, rehabilitating them, improving their performance. And then at the end of the day, I would do a weights workout as well. And that had been my life ever since being a kid, really. So, I was fitter than many, many young people. And certainly, in the top few percent for my age. So going to the AstraZeneca vaccine, it has destroyed everything. My job was my passion, and I was very fortunate enough to be paid for doing something I love. I've accepted that's gone now, but for it to destroy me so physically has been very hard. So yeah, I had the first AstraZeneca vaccine in February 21. Immediately I developed quite severe fevers, really, a fever that I'd never really had before in my life. Suffered for about 3 to 4 days of that. Extreme rigors, central heating on, clothes on. And once that passed, I thought, you know what, that's just a normal side effect kind of thing. But then immediately after that, I started with problems with my heart, which I now know are palpitations, but at the time I'd never experienced anything like that. I was getting palpitations, ectopics, basically these kind of sleep fits. So I'd be trying to fall to sleep at night, and my wife had noticed I was flinging my arms and legs about and, in my sleep, and I was getting all these neurological pains down my arms and legs. And I'd basically wake up where I felt like I was dying and my heart was stopping. And they became so problematic that it was happening 15, 20 times a night. And it turned into insomnia where I just couldn't lie down in bed. So then I fast forward and called my GP. I couldn't get a face-to-face. And he just diagnosed me with nocturnal panic attacks and anxiety, which, I'd never had anything like that in my life. So I didn't even think it could be the vaccine because I'd never had any adverse reactions or side effects to any medication. And I'll try and keep it brief, but then I needed a month off work because I just couldn't sleep. It was like 3, 4, 5 days with no sleep because every time I tried to lie down, these fits would start. I'd get this arrhythmia in my heart. I'd get this dizziness that felt like I was falling off a cliff. So, they tried to pump a load of antidepressants into me, sleeping tablets, which actually made me even worse. So after a month, I had to turn around and go, this whatever's not working, it's getting worse. And then the fateful decision was nobody cottoned on, and I didn't cotton on. I ended up having the second vaccine in May, and immediately I started to have quite severe chest pains, which resulted in me calling a couple of ambulances and being rushed to hospital with suspected heart attack. And it turned out my heart was going into ventricular tachycardia, and I was kept on acute coronary care unit, so basically ICU for my heart for a week. While they tried to figure out what was going on with me, they wouldn't let me get out of bed for a week. It turns out my D-dimer was off the charts, so they suspected blood clots because I told them I'd just had the vaccine. And unfortunately, they didn't find any blood clots at the time, and they couldn't work out what was causing my heart. So I kept saying, well, I've had that vaccine, and even though I told them that, they just couldn't figure out what was going on with my heart. I had MRIs, and they were expecting to find structural changes to my heart because that's what normally would cause something like this VT. And they didn't find that, and then that was the start, really, of my journey of worsening and worsening health from May 21 up until when I met you, Debbie, in I think it was October, November 22. In that time, I collapsed twice. I was back in hospital with pericarditis, 3 pulmonary embolisms in my heart, worsening neurological symptoms, muscular symptoms, and basically, you name it, there's, lots of symptoms. I was getting blurred vision. I've got tinnitus, face rashes. I couldn't control my bladder. There was just all sorts of problems, really. So it accumulated in 2022, me going into hospital in London, where they kept me in there for over a month because they were extremely worried about my heart at that time and, whether I was going to actually, be a sudden death statistic. So they did some more extensive testing on my heart because they wasn't happy with my VT in my heart. They reviewed my scans for my blood clots. They actually said my blood clots had cleared by this time of August of 22 from the May. But they found extensive, small vessel disease on my lungs. And through being in there for a month and doing so many scans on me and testing, they did a CPET test on me. And they figured out that my muscles could not use the oxygen for any activity. So essentially, I went into using carbohydrates and anaerobic metabolism as soon as I started moving. And such was the dramatic nature of it. The professor there said, we think you've got a muscle disease called myopathy. So that was August of 22. So they couldn't afford to keep me in hospital any longer. They felt that I was stable enough to come home from London, and they referred me back to my local hospitals in Manchester with the advice that they follow up this muscle disease and continue to monitor my lungs and heart. My hospitals locally were slow to take that advice, so nobody's monitored my lungs since, because they've been so busy. I've had to fight tooth and nail for them to keep monitoring my heart. I've just been diagnosed with more heart problems in March of this year, March 24. I had to have an invasive catheter into my heart to investigate my worsening heart function. And I had the biopsies that the hospital in London recommended in August of 22. The hospital initially rejected them and said, we don't think, there's anything too serious to worry about. So they initially rejected the advice from the hospital in London to do the biopsies urgently. And I had to fight tooth and nail through my MP, etc., to get the biopsies in May of last year. And then basically since May of last year, I've had no treatment from the NHS, and I wouldn't wish what's happened to me again on anybody. My case, granted, in defence of the NHS has been very, very complex, which I've come on here to share today. But it's not an excuse, really, for how myself's been treated. And basically that's what I'd like to share today, just to try and explain to the viewers what's happened to me since those biopsies last year, and how my health has been, and where people like me, the reality that we face.
Thank you for that, Adam. And I'd just like to add, for people watching too, that Adam's been very brave in telling you what's been going on with regards to his medical health. But sadly, of course, Adam, we know that, you've separated from your wife and you've lost pretty much everything, and you barely have any support at all. And what strikes me is that from the get-go, you and all of the other vaccine injured and bereaved that we speak to have been fighting, literally fighting, not just fighting for answers and for treatment, but fighting to be heard, to be listened to be believed. You've been fobbed off with mental health problems and panic attacks and anxiety when you have extreme symptoms, and you've never ever had a day sick in your life previously. Very healthy person. And in November 2022, when we last spoke, we were kind of at the situation where you were waiting for answers. You still hadn't got any answers. You were still in what we call a wicker basket. When you put somebody in a wicker basket, or put something in a wicker basket, and you pass it around from place to place, and it just carries on getting passed around. And it appeared to me that that's where we left it in November 2022. So what I want to ask you now, Adam, is we are now in summer 2024. What is a day in the life of Adam like in 3 years down the line from that injection?
Yeah, so my life, Debbie, a day is, and I think you'll find the same for a lot of people, but I'm so inconsistent. So I will give you my absolute best day. So I live in constant pain, but my pain at best is a 3 or a 4 out of 10. And what I mean by that is I get constant angina pain and inflammatory pain in my heart and chest. And I'm in constant neurological pain in my arms and legs, particularly my legs. So at best, that pain is a 4. But at a 4, Debbie, is I can converse with people, and it can be very challenging at times because the pain doesn't stay a 4 for the whole day. It's not consistent. You get waves of worsening pain. But at that level of pain, I can be present in conversations like I am today. And even though it's horrible and uncomfortable and it affects you mentally because you never ever get respite from it, I can do things like this and speak to people. Now, in terms of how I cope with it, I really struggle to sleep because of the neurological pain in my legs, and my heart pain worsens when I lie flat. I'm still not able to lie flat in bed. For some reason, it makes the inflammation, the pericarditis that I've had twice, and which they think is a chronic autoimmune kind of inflammation on my heart now, it makes it a lot worse. And what happens when I lie flat is in bed, when I try and go and sleep at night, I have these what's called non-epileptic fits. So what happens is I'll try and close my eyes. I'll try and close my eyes and go to sleep. I actually live in fear of going to sleep. So I generally can't get any sleep before 4 a.m. at the absolute earliest. Sometimes it's 6 and 7 a.m. So we don't know whether it's the inflammatory pattern to my symptoms, because quite often it's a common inflammatory pattern at night for people. When I lie and close my eyes, I have this constant vertigo spinning in my head anyway. When I close my eyes, this spinning builds up and builds up. And what tends to happen is it coincides with, I get the arrhythmia in my heart. So I get these ectopic beats and very brief runs of my heart goes out of rhythm. They've seen it on the monitors in hospital and they don't quite know what's going on. But basically, essentially is, I don't know quite which one happens first, whether it's the spinning in my head. I think it's the heartbeat. So I'll be trying to go to sleep. I'll get this heartbeat, and then I think the spinning is a reaction. So they think it's the blood pressure dropping dramatically when my heart goes into the rhythm. And then I get this spinning, and it basically jerks me upright, and I have to sit upright, and then my breathing and my heart rate returns to normal. Now, when it happens once or twice, it's uncomfortable and a little bit scary, you know. But unfortunately, when I'm having bad times, it happens so many times. I have to sit up all night. I just can't sleep because every time I'll go back, you know, it could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The same thing will happen again. And it literally feels like you're going to die. It is that bad with my heart, you know. And then to stop it, if I sit up, my heart doesn't go into the arrhythmia. I don't get the spinning and falling sensation like you're falling off a cliff in my head. And I sit up all night. So the problem what I've got is with my good days is on a good day, you know, I try and do things. I'm very limited functionally. So physically, it's like a bucket. I've only got so much physical capability in a day. And at present, you know, I'm able to make my breakfast and tea for myself. I also, when I can, look after my elderly mother. But between that and doing my washing and just trying to keep on top of the house and even attending hospital appointments, that's about my bucket. On an absolute fantastic day, I can walk 250 yards to the local coffee shop and meet a friend, or just sit there and get out of the house and meet people in the coffee shop. And that is a fantastic day to me. But the payoff that I get is the more I try and push myself through this pain with my legs and my heart is it inflames my heart and it inflames my legs. So what happens is in that evening time, you know, if I've done more in that day, then what tends to happen is the problems with my heart tend to be a hell of a lot worse. I don't sleep all night. The pain is getting to 7, 8, 9s out of 10s, which can last sometimes 2 or 3 hours, sometimes 12 hours. And then it just writes off the next few days. I mean, I've even had to cancel hospital appointments on the day because I'm too sick to get there, Deborah. It's like, you know, I'm just too ill to get to hospital appointments sometimes. So there'll only be things like, you know, I'm under that many different specialists, endocrine specialists, gastroenterologists for some of my more minor symptoms, if you like. I just simply can't get there because I'm too sick to get there. You know, sometimes I'll phone patient transport in advance, but I don't like to do that because, you know, I can mobilize on my good days. So it's like living in hell. And when you get those episodes, your whole life flashes before you again. You know, I thought when I collapsed the first time, you know, that was it. And, you know, but when it happens, it's really frightening. And that's what reminds me every day that's why it's important that I speak out, because if I do die in one of my sleep, you know, shortly, then at least I know that I've tried to tell people what's happened and I've done what I believe to be the right thing, because I wasn't particularly religious before this, although I believed in God or a higher power, because, you know, I'm a good person and I believe, you know, there is a good spirit and energy predominantly in the world. And since this has happened to me, that I promised, you know, God or whoever you believe in, that, you know, I promised that I'd do my best to get this out there, because no matter what you believe in, you know, it's simply not right. And the fact that these, as you referred to AstraZeneca making millions, this has happened to thousands of people and nobody is researching why it's happened. The doctors have got no clue why it's happened. The government and AstraZeneca and Pfizer and Moderna, they don't care. They just want to put more jabs in arms. I want to know why they can't research people like me and find what's wrong with this product and say, if it was a car, if it was a plane that kept crashing. Because let's be honest, this is like hundreds of planes crashing all the time. They'd look into it and find out why. And that's all I want. And I just want something positive to come out of what's happened to me. And I don't want this to happen to another child, God forbid, because I've had a good life, or another adult. And so that's why I do what I do.
And we're incredibly grateful to you, Adam, because not only are you having to fight for your life, literally, but you're fighting on behalf of other people. You're putting on events, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. But you mentioned their cost, and the cost to you and all of the vaccine injured and bereaved, physically, psychologically, has been, I don't have a word to describe how immense it's been. But I want to actually address the elephant in the room, which is the financial cost, because this is a common theme that I'm hearing. And as many people, if you're watching from a different country, the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme in the United Kingdom awards a one-off payment of £120,000 if you can get it, which many people can't. However, Adam, you had a stellar career with an amazing job, with what I would presume is a pretty decent salary. You had a house to run, you had your wife, you had a great life, right? How much has this actually cost you? We're 3 years down the line now, and you're not working, you've lost your job, you've lost your marriage, you've lost your home, you're caring for your elderly mother who's extremely unwell. So what are the financial costs in this?
I'd just like to point out, I was on a very good wage for the latter part of my career, but it took me a long time to get to that wage, Debbie. So, I was on the above average wage for many years, so I was lucky, but then I was on a very high wage. So, I don't want to, I'll make my wage conservative if you like, but I could easily have earned £100,000 a year. I was earning between 60 and 80 because I was choosing quality of life with my family. So for the last 3 years, if I knock it down to £60,000 a year, that's £180,000 of lost wages, lost income. And it's cost me £40,000 so far in private care and all the treatments and things that we've tried. So I've spent £220,000 over the last 3 years to still be here and to try and improve my health. So the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme is a huge fight to get. That's even if I get it, I've applied for it. And I've spent £100,000 more than that money already. The biggest thing I'd like to point out for people is, I don't know, because of my prognosis, I don't know how long I've got left, as of quite a lot of us. The biggest thing I struggle with is as a guy, and stuff, even though I've split with my family, it gave me great pleasure in providing for my family. That's what, people, as partly we go to work for as well, to help people and stuff. But to be able to provide for your family and to have that taken away and then see your family, through no fault of their own, have to struggle financially because of no fault of what's happened to me and what's the trauma that they've been through because of me, because this has happened to me. So, say I die tomorrow, Debbie, is why should they be left because of a vaccine out, with no support when, if I'd have worked till I was 65 or whatever, I was extremely fit, my medical history backs that up. There was no reason why I would be working till I was 65 years of age on a good salary. no one's going to look after my family. And like I say, it's not about money for me, Deborah. The 120,000, that's not going to bring my life back. But what it would do is it would allow me to have some more private treatment, an ongoing chance of preventing the deterioration in my present health, where the NHS and government are, I can only assume, trying to cover this up, because I can't come to any other conclusion on how I'm being treated. I can only treat the evidence as I find it. So, yeah, it's not about money for me. It's never going to bring my health back. It's just about recognition and people doing the right thing and justice. I understand people made mistakes. I've made mistakes in my life and with people maybe that I've looked after in hindsight. But you know what? The reason I was so successful is I was always honest with people, and we learn the most in our mistakes. I always think when you make a mistake, you learn more than when things go well. If you're prepared to, some people aren't prepared to reflect. And that's what life's about. It's about learning from mistakes and moving on. And that's what I find really difficult to accept.
There aren't many occasions before COVID that I could say that I'd met so many angels in human form, but you're one of them, and many of the vaccine injured are. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. I do find this very difficult, and I can't even imagine how difficult you must be finding this, Adam, and for people that are watching as well, because the strain is huge. And I know, Adam, that we've talked before, and I hope you don't mind if I reveal this, but I know that you're incredibly grateful to your neighbours and to your friends and to your family for bringing you takeaways and helping you feed yourself, because basically you've got pretty much nothing left, have you? So you have to rely on the goodwill of others to help you out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so obviously my physical health is unpredictable, and for me to look after myself on a daily basis and just make meals, we have to online grocery shop because I'm not well enough to go to a grocery store. I'm not always capable of physically doing it because I'm in so much pain and energy and everything else. So there's times where I'm bedridden, and on those occasions, we have to phone takeaways. And there's times where I have to live on the ground floor now. So people they cook me meals from down the road. They know what's happened to me, people in my community. And they come to my bedroom window and deliver a cooked meal to me. And that's the way things are. And I just like to say, everybody that's supported me online, I don't really tell many people this, but the people who know me, who are close to me, know this. I do suffer with my mental health, and to the point where if it wasn't for everybody's support, Deborah, I couldn't keep going. There is absolutely no way I could keep going. People pick me up off the floor on a daily and weekly basis. I can't tell you what we live through, and there's people that's already committed suicide, and I won't lie to you, the suffering that we go through. So everybody's support, they don't realize it keeps me going and keeps me going. And I just want to thank people, and that's not lost on me. And on the dark days, that's what keeps me going. I don't know whether, Debbie, you want me to go into what's happened on the biopsy since last year to explain where I'm up to with the NHS, or whether you want to leave that today. I'm not too sure.
What I would like to do now, Adam, is to pull myself together and ask you, what experience have you had with the NHS? Because I'm presuming the NHS are calling everybody, all of us healthy people, in for tests. Test. They want us in for this and in for that and in for the other. So I'm presuming that the NHS are really looking after you well, and that you're getting a social package of help. And I would also expect the MHRA to be in touch with you, because as we hear from the MHRA board meeting and Dame June Rain, we can rely on them for safety, and we can rely on them to look after you and to regulate the product that you've had. And the yellow card, of course, that you've put in, I'm presuming you're in good touch with the MHRA. What is the position with the NHS and the MHRA, Adam?
So firstly, the MHRA sent me an email. I struggled to put my yellow card in. So every time, because I've had so many documented adverse reactions, every time I put it into their computer system, it wouldn't accept it and just would crash on the final page. So I'd spend an hour putting in all the details, etc., and it would crash. So I sent them an email of all my diagnosis and problems and said, I'd like to register this. And they responded to my email and asked me to for permission for copies of all my medical records to obviously verify all this. So because my consultants have contracted AstraZeneca and asked them if they'd want to research and find out what's going on with this vaccine, and of course they didn't want to help, I was just a bit guarded about just handing over all my medical documents to these people, just because of, I'm speaking openly on here. It's not about money for me, this, but should there ever be any court cases in the future with my family, I just wanted to be, guarded of what I'm passing over to the people that injured me. So the MHRA, I emailed them back and said, can you tell me, who will have access to these documents, exactly in terms of the freedom of information, what will happen with this information, how will you process it? And yeah, I sent them that back and they never answered me. And I tried to follow it up with numerous emails and phone calls, and I've never had any response from them. So I have no position whatsoever. I don't know what MHRA are doing. I mean, anecdotally, I do know MHRA are aware of me because of my presence on social media. They actually blocked me on social media. So, to block me and, my story. And somebody made a freedom of information request. And it turns out they reported me to the UK Health Security Agency about spreading misinformation on the vaccines. Well, anyone that knows me is I actually have put evidence of my medical records up on social media. So anyone, like I say, so that's the MHRA. In terms of the NHS, I'll tell you the story and people can make their own mind up. So a whole year ago, I had the muscle biopsies, which I got told, they're hardly going to show anything. We don't think you need them, but we'll reluctantly do them anyway because you're getting sicker and sicker, and we can see that. So the results came back lit up like a Christmas tree. It came back that my muscle fibers had the same appearance as somebody with a muscle disease, a genetic muscle disease called myotonic dystrophy. It also came back that they had the same appearance as somebody with another kind of muscle disease, myopathy. Now, there's thousands of kinds of muscle diseases called myopathy. That's myopathy just encompasses muscle disease. So there's lots of types of myopathy that they can see it's a muscle disease, but they don't fully understand what it is yet. And then finally, it came back with something else, which they've only admitted to me in February this year, that basically they saw on my biopsies that my own immune system, the part of your primitive immune system, your complement system, and in particularly C5 beta C9, was all over my biopsies, basically attacking the capillaries in my body and my muscle fibers. So they said to me as well that they've seen this. The only time they've seen it is when they've done autopsies of the deceased people in COVID. They've found the exact same thing in their organs as what was found in my muscle biopsies last year, and essentially is what killed people with COVID autopsy. So they've said to me, what's going on with you, looks like the same as what has killed people. So initially, off the back of the biopsies a whole year ago, they just said, well, wow, this is extremely complex. We're going to have an MDT meeting about you. So I got a letter in July of last year to say they were diagnosing with myotonic dystrophy, which is a horrendous genetic disease. And that's what I got. And then I got a phone call to say, well, you don't present like you've got this genetic disease because obviously it's normally genetic and it'd be passed down from your family. And obviously there's none of that in my family ever. And I don't physically present like I've got it. So they said, we don't think you've got that, even though your biopsies show that. So a long story short, I've had to fight tooth and nail because these tests are expensive. I had to fight for genetic blood tests. And they have admitted to me verbally that they have seen on rare occasions that vaccines and medications can cause genetic mutations in people, and it shouldn't be possible, but it can cause these diseases. So they've admitted that to me. At the moment in time, I've had the blood tests done. I had to get my MP involved to complain to the hospital and put multiple letters in to say, because they weren't going to test me genetically, they were just going to say, we don't think you've got it, even though it showed up. So they have agreed finally to do these blood tests, and I had the blood test done in March of this year. So a whole, how many months is that? 9-10 months later, they finally agreed to do those blood tests. So that's for diagnosis 1, myotonic dystrophy, that obviously is a horrible, nasty thing that kills people, affects the heart, the lungs, etc. So then for the myopathy, I asked for a second opinion because they just basically told me they don't know how to treat it. There's not really much they can do. So I went to Queen Square in London, the National Neurological Hospital, and got an opinion there. And then again, they just said to me, there's no treatment for your myopathy. Again, they agreed to do some expensive blood tests. Again, I haven't had the results back. That was in January of this year. And they've sent those bloods off for testing on the chance that they can recognize it as being a type of muscle disease myopathy that there's a treatment for and they understand. And they've approached my local hospital for samples of my blood, my muscle that is frozen there in the biobank, so they can study it and look if there's anything to be done. But basically, they've not discharged me. They're going to see me once a year in London, and I've got a named nurse in the meantime, but they just said there's no treatment for what you've got. We can only treat, refer you to cardiology or refer you to other specialties and treat the symptoms as, if they start to affect your heart, lungs, etc. So that's where I am on that. And then my local hospital, who basically, I've been pushing them for treatment since last year and still not had any. From, my MP actually wrote into the hospital and asked them, she said, this gentleman has done the right thing. He did the vaccine, what the government asked, and he's 2.5 years in and nobody's treating him. She asked for them urgently to get an MDT together and come up with a treatment plan and plan of action for me. She wrote that letter in October last year. Now, it took place unbeknown to me. I was never present. I don't know the minutes of that meeting. It took place in February of this year, a whole 4 months after she wrote that letter. And I got a phone call from them to say, because I've got a muscle disease, it's landed on the muscle disease professor's desk there, who's a neurologist. I got a phone call to say, well, we've had a conversation about you, and we think high-dose steroids and immune suppressant drugs are the way forward for you. Because basically, what you've got is hugely complex. You've got so many things going on. Like I say, it's now in the last year, I've got evidence that it's damaging all the small blood vessels in my heart from when I had a heart catheter in March. My kidney function is now decreasing, so they want me to go to a nephrologist because I've got a small vessel disease, or it appears that way in my kidneys. So they all had the meeting, and I was under a long COVID doctor at Wythenshawe Hospital. So the neurologist said, well, you've got all these neurological problems, but we don't think it's primarily a neurological problem. We think all your small blood vessel disease, because I saw a vascular surgeon last year who felt I had small blood vessel disease, who referred me to rheumatology that got rejected. They said, we think it's ischemic and it's coming from this autoimmune, and that's destroying your blood vessels, basically, as our best guess. And that's why you've got neurological problems. So as neurologists, we're probably not the best people to treat you. So they said, we would like the long COVID doctor who's been fighting for you to treat you and supervise high-dose steroids and immune drugs. I then got a letter from the long COVID doctor at another hospital in Manchester to say that the clinical director of Wythenshawe Hospital basically had forbid her from me being treated by her anymore. I should never have been seeing her long COVID clinic because I'm vaccine injured. And they think that my health is too complex and she isn't, skilled and suitable enough person to basically supervise this experiment of steroids and immune drugs on me. Because bear in mind, Deborah, as well, is I've been chronically immune suppressed since this began. I only found this out because I get letters from the NHS. So they've done tests on me to show that I've got, my B cells are worse than a person with HIV. I get a letter to say I'm on the immune high risk. And if I catch something, to go to hospital immediately and present this letter. No doctors have ever told me that. So anyway, I get a letter from there. She's not allowed to. I'm too complex. I shouldn't have been seen in the long COVID clinic. She's not allowed to see me. So I get a letter to say she's going to refer me to the vasculitis service, because of this suspected blood problem and my own immune system attacking itself. I've since found out the vasculitis service has rejected my referral again. They rejected it last year off the vascular surgeon. So at this moment, you could say that I'm homeless as a patient on the NHS. Thank goodness, I keep writing in emails to the doctors' secretaries and appealing to their better nature. I've received a letter this morning, actually, to say that they're now labelling me as a multi-organ, multi-system inflammatory syndrome off the vaccine. And the consultant has put in his letter this morning that he's going to try and refer me to another rheumatology service, even though I've been rejected by two, because these rheumatology services look at my case and go, we don't know what to do with him. He said he'll try again for me, but he suspects it might bounce back and might come back to him because nobody else wants to look after me and nobody wants to take responsibility for me. He did say in his letter, interestingly enough, which I really respect him for saying this, that they're starting to see quite a few with the same clinical presentation in the neurology clinic and other clinics in the hospital like me. So I really appreciated his honesty in that letter that I received. And then just to add this in, just for the context of viewers and stuff, I hope it's not too confusing for the viewers to understand, but essentially there's a test on the NHS called the spike protein antibodies test you can get. So I've had mine measured and it was 300 times the upper limit of the test. They actually commented that they were not able to measure my antibodies any higher because they haven't got the facility to do that. So they can only say that that's the limit of what they could measure. Now, there's some argument, and I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of the people will say, a lot of the doctors will say that you make the antibodies in relation to the spike protein. So that was the idea of the vaccine. You produce your own spike protein off the vaccine, you produce high antibodies, and that protects you from getting COVID. So what should have happened with the idea of the boosters is the antibodies wane because you stop making spike protein, therefore you keep having another booster. Now, it tends to be in a lot of the injured, we've still got these massively high spike protein antibodies, which tend to indicate we've still got massive amount of spike protein in our body, and or we still may be making it. Now, bear in mind, in the human body, we've got trillions of cells, so we don't know how many may be infected permanently or still making it, God forbid. Now, I don't know much about HIV, so if I go on, I'll try and make this brief. But in HIV, they actually use the antibody test to determine their use of whether they prescribe you drugs and, whether you're infected. That's what they use, antibodies. Now, there's other tests that aren't available in this country. They're available in Germany because the German government are the only country in the world that have come out and admitted there's a problem with these vaccines and that are studying vaccine-injured people. So in Germany, you can actually pay for tests that test the spike protein in the blood, in parts of the immune system, in the exosomes, which are something in the cell that transmits extracellular and intracellular. So it gives you a picture of what's going on inside the cells, which is a big problem to try and measure spike protein because the spike protein isn't just floating around the body unless it's acute or you're still making it. It's stuck in cells of the myocytes of the heart, the endothelium, you name it, all kinds of tissue, the receptors on the neurological system. So they're finding in people that are shipping their blood off to Germany that they can also test for the presence of the mRNA from the vaccines there. And they're finding people have still got massive amounts of spike protein, and some people it would indicate from the mRNA status are still making spike protein. And just to back that up a little bit, because I don't want people saying that I'm talking a load of rubbish, I'm happy to be proven wrong. And these are the questions I would beg a government that was, trying to help people to do the right thing. Carlo Brogna published a study in 2023 of August. He studied healthcare workers in Italy and found 50% of them were still producing spike protein 6 months after the last vaccine. He actually had to close the study. He cited that it was for financial reasons. They stopped testing these people and they didn't follow up longer than 6 months to still see whether they're making it. Now, I mentioned this to doctors in my NHS appointments, and it's like they go completely mute. They are not willing to answer that question, or it seems even think about it. Now, I've had private answers because I speak to doctors all around the world, because luckily, me being on social media, that is one positive thing that's come out of it. Again, it's in its infancy over this last year, but the general consensus is, unfortunately, it looks like there is a portion of the people that took the vaccine who are still producing the spike protein and therefore have got some ongoing genetic modification from these vaccines. And that is what people are thinking and finding. And I've thrown a lot in there, Debbie, but that's where I'm up to and where I live with. And the NHS basically, I don't think, want to know, because, I'd argue, is there a conflict of interest? The government pushed all these vaccines. The NHS, are the government. And that's where I'm up to. This is our lives, and people playing God with our lives, and we're not going to get the treatment on the NHS. We're basically just being left. And I don't understand these people, why they would do it.
Where are you now, Dame June Rain? Where are you now, Dr. Alison Cave? All of these experts that told you to protect the vulnerable. You did what you were told to do, Adam, and I want to know where and what these people that are responsible are going to do about it. And we certainly won't keep we will carry on forever. And what you're describing there is something that Professor Flowers described when people were being diagnosed with long COVID, he called it spike protein disease. So that completely backs up everything that you've just said. And what I find even more startling is when we hear the likes of the MHRA and the NHS talking about personalised care. We're all going to get personalised care. You're not getting personalised care because basically there is no care for you. And like I've said before, it's like you're being passed around in this wicker basket from hematologist to cardiologist to neurologist, and it just goes on. And because we don't have anybody in any health system, I believe, with the title vaccine injury consultant that can oversee these multiple problems that all of you are having, somebody that can case manage every single one of you, that can personalize your care, can personalize your treatment. Because the story that I hear from all of you is not only are you having to manage your lives with the most horrific illnesses, but you're having to micromanage these appointments and transport and how you get back or if you're going to be admitted. And it's just a complete minefield. I know that one of the things that you're very keen to do, and you're a very humble person, and I have to just remind our viewers and listeners that Adam doesn't want to really give out any details about any donate pages that he has, because every bit of money that he's raising is going towards COVID vaccine injured for general use. But I know one of your dreams, Adam, is this special. Tell us about this blood cleaning therapy and how much it would cost in order for you to go through a course of blood cleansing therapies.
So a lot of people with long COVID particularly, and also people with vaccine injury, they've been going over to Germany and a German clinic in Cyprus. So the Germans are the only sort of ones studying this, and there's various therapies that basically take out the whole blood in somebody's body and filter it out. And they can filter out things like the microclots and the clots. And they can filter out the spike proteins and the antibodies, the inflammatory antibodies, and the things in the immune system that are attacking self. So a lot of people have been over there and had a number of treatments. Now, the treatments are just under sort of £2,000 a time. Now, I did send my medical records to them, and I've spoke to them a few times over Zoom. And to be honest with you, they did suggest that I would need a minimum of 12 treatments because of the severity of my injuries, whereas the average treatments are around about 6 treatments. Now, I would like to say that people have been incredibly generous to me last time and all the way through this. And I've already raised quite a large sum of money, but I didn't realise when I set it up, for example, that GoFundMe takes such a huge percentage. But anyway, last year, I travelled to the US and spent a large portion of that money on stem cell treatment, which unfortunately didn't help. So I've kept the remainder of that money, which was £10,000 just over, and I don't take people's money lightly. I've never wanted to spend it where I felt like the odds of something working wouldn't be of value and reduce. So all the supplements I buy and everything else, I'm lucky enough to be able to do that with my benefits and with the help from people that give me them at reduced prices and things like that. So I want to continue this fight, and I don't know whether that's going to cure me, but I speak to people that have been, and it's definitely helped them. So I feel like I'm basically running out of options, because the other option was IVIG, intravenous immunoglobulins, which doesn't cure people. That's £10,000 a month, and in the USA, it's helping a lot of the vaccine injured. My doctors over over here did ask the NHS for it on my behalf because they felt it could help my immune system, because it neutralizes the spike protein, is what people think. But unfortunately, the NHS won't pay for it for me because it's a scarce commodity at £10,000 a month. And obviously, probably if they give it to me, the floodgates would open to everybody. So even though my doctors have put an independent patient request form into NHS England, they've told me the likelihood of it being granted are next to zero. Even though there's evidence of it helping people with acute COVID, that nearly, to stop them dying, and long COVID, and lots of evidence in America that helps vaccine injury, the NHS just won't cover it. So I can't get IVIG, which would be the number one. So yeah, the blood washing is all I'm left with, Deborah, and it's a huge cost. But I would like to go over this summer and have that treatment, because there's nothing else for me. There's nothing else to try. So I would like to go and try that treatment.
So we're going to pop up your donate page, Adam, and I know that you didn't want us to because of the reasons that you've just spoken about, but we're going to. And I'd be really grateful for everybody watching this second interview with Adam. Please share this. And if you like what we do, please encourage more people to join, because the more we get people to join, the more news we can put out, and the more vaccine injured we can speak to, because we must never, ever, ever let the vaccine injured and the vaccine bereaved be forgotten, and we won't. I know from speaking to you before that your MP's been pretty active, and she's been trying to get a lot of attention from Rishi Sunak, but basically she's just being paid lip service and she's getting absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, so myself and John Watt, we saw that there was going to be a Prime Minister's question time on GB News. So John said his piece, which was fantastic. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, promised live on air that he didn't realise we were all censored. Of course he didn't. And he didn't realise that, that we'd been trying to contact him via various mediums. Of course he didn't. But he promised live on air that he would look into our cases, take our details, and get back to us. So from that moment, really, I contacted his office via phone calls at Westminster. I left messages explaining the situation, that Rishi Sunak had promised me live on air that he was going to look into my case, and here's my details, and I look forward to you getting back to me. Obviously, I never got any calls in return from his office. I emailed his office at Westminster and up in the northeast, his constituency office. I got a few acknowledgements to say they'd received it, incredibly busy, blah, 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 an automated message. Again, I got nowhere. So, of course, this was now over 3 months ago, and we still not heard anything. So my MP has been trying to help me religiously after seeing what's happened to me and seeing how I'm being treated by the NHS and the government, because she has actually, in her time, contacted 3 of the different health secretaries we've had since the beginning of COVID. I've had an email of one that said they would help me. It was Steve Barclay. Unfortunately, he's left office and never did help me. I think the other 2 verbally agreed to look into my case and help me, but again, they never did. So my MP decided that, I showed her the video with Rishi Sunak, and she's seen enough evidence herself that, we're not getting the help we deserve. So she promised to bring it up in question time, which she did about 6 weeks ago now. She brought it up to Penny Mordaunt and said, the Prime Minister knows about us. She's seen the emails and records of the phone calls I made, and she can see that he's not responded to me. So she brought up that case, and she did mention that, we need help and the NHS aren't helping us. And she brought that case up. But again, sadly, we've had no response to these ongoing requests for help.
Absolutely shocking. But you know what? Bravo, all of you. And these are the lengths that vaccine injured are having to go to. Bravo to all of you. Where are you now, Rishi Sunak? Where are any of them going to be?
My constituent Adam Rowland recently met the Prime Minister, who promised, live on television no less, that he would be in touch with him regarding his negative reaction to the COVID vaccine and difficulty accessing the treatment that has been recommended on the NHS. Since then, despite repeated requests, Adam has had no response from anyone in government and feels like he's being treated as some sort of pariah and anti-vax conspiracy theorist. He's not. He's just a man who did the right thing in taking up the vaccine and was one of the unfortunate minority who became ill, and he needs some support. Will the Leader of the House please help Adam get the response he was promised?
I will, of course, absolutely do that. And if the Honourable Lady will give me the details, I shall follow that up straight after this session. Those that were injured by vaccines do need access to support and healthcare and answers, and we should ensure that they get that.
Can we just rewind? Honestly, my brain is spinning. Did you say that the MHRA had blocked you and you've been reported to the UKHSA? I'm so sorry. Can we just rewind a little bit? Could you just explain?
Yeah, so it's ridiculous, quite frankly. So obviously I'm vocal on social media. Everything I say on social media, Debbie, comes from a good place, as in, it's about getting some kind of justice and being heard for the vaccine injured. So quite often, when we find these startling information about how, the clinical trials and things like that and how we're being ignored, censored and everything, we'll tag MHRA in it because, as the regulatory body we hope that would protect us, we're sort of appealing for them for help. So I found out that I went on MHRA after tagging them and I found out I was blocked, which was quite staggering because why was I blocked when you'd think they, like we were saying earlier, that they'd be interested in people like me to try and investigate and learn from and protect the UK public. So we then found out that they'd been blocking every single vaccine injured person on social media who had said anything against the vaccines being unsafe or anything. But we were all people that are medically certified vaccine injured. So I had no idea why they were blocking us. So there was a big thing on social media about it, the MHRA. There was loads of us, Alex Mitchell, everybody was blocked by the MHRA. So there's a gentleman on social media who's quite verbal and investigates the harms from psychiatric drugs. So he actually did a freedom of information request and wanted to know why we were blocked and asked more information regarding this. And we were staggered to find out that we had been blocked and reported to the UK Health Security Agency. You know what, as being some kind of threat to the UK, I just do not know why and understand. So after he made this request and it all became public on social media and, he published this request and found out why we were all being blocked, the laughable thing was, about a week later, they unblocked us all. Because I put on I put all of my social media. It's not a very good look that the people that are supposed to protect us and investigating are actually blocking us, so because everybody was like, wow, why are they blocking these people? And then the freedom of information request went in, it came transparent why they blocked us. They then did a U-turn because, it wasn't very good publicity for them, I would imagine.
You cannot make this up. You really cannot make this up. I'm not even going to ask you if you've had contact with Dr. Henrietta Hughes or whether she's blocked you as well, because it is just so incredulous. But I want our viewers and listeners to know that this is happening. This is real. This doesn't need fact checking. These are the facts. Unbelievable, Adam. Totally unbelievable. But believable.
All I'd say, Deborah, is all these people need to do is speak to people like me. Then there'll be no people making, all you have to do is come and speak to us and do their jobs, right? That's it.
Got to say, I think this is a really important message for everybody wherever you are, whichever country you're in, you know, the bravery of the vaccine injured speaking out is raising the alarm for every single one of us, every single person on this planet. You are the walking evidence. You are the truth. These are your lives. This isn't about data. This isn't about statistics. Every single piece of data and every single statistic is a person, is a life, is a human being, and that's what we've got to remember. I mean, I'm just utterly shocked, but thank you so much for sharing that with us, Adam. Thank you. I just want to ask you, is there anything that I've forgotten to ask you, or is there anything that you would like to say before your final word?
No, I apologise if I jumped around a lot for the viewers and I might sound confusing because, I'm very emotional and I'm trying to, I'm from a medical background and I've just got to try and remember it's confusing for people to understand. Obviously, if anybody wanted to contact me for more information, I'm more than willing to share if it helps people. I would just like to, I know you've had John Watt on recently. If you don't mind, I'd just like to put a plug in for the event on Sunday that myself, John Watt and Alex Mitchell, who are 3 people been injured by the vaccine, and we've been incredibly fortunate. I'll see MHRA, Dr. John Campbell, Dr. Tina Pearce, and one of the MPs up in Scotland, Neil Hanvey, are all supporting free of charge. So we've put this event on for 2 reasons, really. It's to keep this thing going and try and give people like me hope that there are people fighting and doing things behind the scenes. So that's the purpose of it. And then the other is all the tickets that we sell. Unfortunately, we're not going to raise as much money as we would have liked because of the venue size and how many tickets we've sold, etc. But all the money is going to the vaccine injured. So, there's somebody in my mind that hopefully with the money that we raise, and I've got a little bit of a say in where that money goes, that I can buy a piece of equipment for somebody that will really improve their quality of life. So the event will be recorded. We're paying somebody to record the event. So hopefully we can release some of the things there. All these people who are appearing, Asim and Dr. Campbell and stuff, we thank them from the bottom of my heart and our hearts, that they're prepared to fight for us too, Debbie, just like you. And it means so much to us. And we just hope that, we can clip that out, because we're going to have interviews with everybody in the first half of the show. And the second half will be a Q&A from the audience. So anyone in the audience can ask whatever question they want to any one of us, any of the doctors, any of the people that have been injured. And we just hope it's a great event. And it'd be nice to think that something like this could keep happening. We shouldn't have to do it. We shouldn't have to do it, but if we don't do it, nobody else will. So we're trying our best. I'd just like to plug that. So thank you.
And, Adam, what we say right back at you is nothing about you without you. And on that note, it's over to you, Adam. Thank you so much for your last word.
I would just like to appeal, Debbie, to the doctors. So if there's any doctors listening within the NHS or anybody who's a family friend or of a doctor, I'd just like to suggest to you now that, I speak to doctors in the NHS and they tell me they see more and more of people like me. I appreciate that mistakes have been made, and I'm not trying to point the fingers at you guys, but I really feel like you guys are the only ones that can change this. So what I mean by that is, I would like you somehow to speak to your peers or come out collectively or even individually and just come out and just raise the alarm and just say we've got a bit of a problem here. Not for me, because it's not going to change things for me, but I just want you to think that if you don't say anything, this is going to continue to happen because this technology will be used again. And these injuries will just be happening in another guise, another format. I'd just like you to think about why you got into medicine and why you do what you want to do. So that's my message really, Deborah, is, you need to say something isn't right, because this thing's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I really, I fear for people, I really do.